tacka er alumner för att ni har kommit tillbaka till er gamla institution och uppträder idag. Och som jag sa inledningsvis, jag hälsar er alla hjärtligt välkomna, och sen vill jag tacka Marcus för att ni har arrangerat det här evenemanget. Tack ska ni ha och välkomna hit.
Yes, hej alla, välkommen till min föreläsning. Jag kommer ta den här på engelska för att jag vill gärna att det här budskapet når en större skara än Sverige. So without further ado, my name is Greip, and I will have a talk about how to survive being mediocre. I will delve into this question further, but let me start introducing myself. I studied here I started here in 2010 and graduated in 2013, and I went to game design and graphics back when it was called Gotland University. And I've been one of the founding members, or I am one of the founding members for Eat, Create, Sleep, and have been the art director and community manager since then. Eat, Create, Sleep is quite a lot of people, but not really. The core team is just 4 people, and most of them sit in the audience. But I want to give credit where it's due. We have some former members and collaborators. But we're a small team of 4 to 6 people in the core team, and we are situated in Science Park in the harbor here, and we've been working there since 2013. And so far we have released 1 game, Among Ripples, which has been quite successful on Steam. It's wrong to call it a free-to-play game because we don't have any monetization, so I would call it a non-commercial game. So it's a completely free game available on Steam, and so far we have had like 400,000 downloads. I guess the best way to describe it is a small fish tank where you try to balance an ecosystem. And currently we have Crest in early access, and our plan is to make a full release in the end of 2016. And this mysterious project is, I guess this is the reveal for our new project. So there's not too much to say about it right now. So what is Crest? Crest is our current game. It's a god game where you write commandments to influence your followers. So it's sort of like a religious simulator where you tell them how you want them to survive, and they might reinterpret your commandments. They might associate a commandment that is like, if you say you should prioritize helping people in the desert, might get changed to you should eat the people in the desert. Yes, cannibalism is a part of our game. And this talk is actually was inspired by Rami Ismail, which I think most of you know of. Rami had a talk earlier this year called You Don't Stand a Chance, where he had the basic premise that everyone who haven't started in the industry yet think that they will succeed because they have this bias that you mostly hear stories from people who succeed. And although it's an excellent talk and I really recommend it, I think the basic premise is, from my own perspective, false, because I don't think that most people out there believe that they will succeed. At least when I started, I thought that I would fail. And so I had 2 binary states, like I thought I would succeed really well or fail spectacularly. And to illustrate this, I will show 2 small clips made from a person called Video Game Donkey, who played Game Dev Tycoon.
Smith. Wow, 2. And beautiful. Oh my God! Oh my God! Will Smith would be so proud of me. It's selling like hotcakes. Millionaire! I'm a millionaire! I'm a fucking millionaire!
So that's how you succeed in the game industry. Let's see how you fail.
Chris, what the heck? It's a whole new technology. What? This is stupid. I'm making the best games and nobody wants to buy it. I'm a millionaire. I don't have to take this shit.
So that was basically my idea of game development before I started as a indie developer. But as time went on, I realized that there's at least a third state, and it's called this. And I don't know what this is. Why we seldom talk about like if you watch Steam reviews, for example, you mostly see people who are really excited or really annoyed. And I guess if something is just so, I guess it doesn't really fire you up to talk about it. Maybe it's a common trait of being a human, or maybe it's our polarized society where we have to have an extreme opinion, whatever it is. I don't know, but I realized that the third option is even more scary, and here's a graph of the feels. So this is sort of how we have felt since January 2013, and if you sort of collect all the emotional data, you can sort of feel like there's a constant limbo where you don't know if you will succeed or fail. And so this talk is mostly about from then to now, to see how it feels to be mediocre. And our group started in flames, you could say. Oscar Tussell and I. Oscar Tussell was our former lead designer. We were part of a bigger group, and I guess we overstretched ourselves. We had grand ideas, and most of the team left, or the group, because we were still a student group. And we had spent a half year on pre-production on this game, and we realized that, there's just a few more months until Gotland Game Conference, and I would graduate that summer, and Oscar had to do his big game project, and we feel constant panic that perhaps our career ended before it started. So we came up with this small game, Among Ripples, which I pitched, and we basically made the core of the experience in just a few months. I think of course it's a simple presentation, but I think it was amazing that we managed to, just in a few months, manage to make something that we were happy with. I was convinced that we would fail from the start. So we used Among Ripples as a launching pad to recruit new members, to show them that we had a vision, we wanted to make more games, and our vision for our company is this. This is from a mockumentary called Spinal Tap, and why I show you this obscure image is because our image of our studio is sort of like a band. It doesn't need to be rock, but it's sort of like a music group who it's more of a lifestyle business where we try to we want to earn our keep so we can make the albums we want to make, but we don't want to grow into become like a 20 people studio or anything, because then you lose the dynamic of a small group. And that's just like can you think of a lot of music bands who make it big and then think, oh, maybe we should add 10 more drummers, so we'll have the best drum team, but then you probably lose the creative spirit of that group. Of course, there are pop groups that are like 30 people, but yeah, let's not talk about those. So with this in mind, we started our lifestyle business, and for a time everything was good, and we got some new members, Christopher, the other artist, and Roland Koch, which I think many of you know because he likes to collaborate with anyone, and he's a great audio designer. And of course Johannes, our lead programmer. And for a time we thought that the sky was the only limit, and we didn't really think about economics or anything. And we started on Crest for real. But then when we hit rock bottom because we were unrealistic, and we did a crowdfunding because we realized we worked for a year for free on Crest, and we realized that we need to pay wages sometime. And if anyone wonders why we chose Indiegogo, that's because we had no choice, because Kickstarter opened up for Swedes like 3 months after we were finished. That felt really horrible. And yes, you could make an international crowdfunding before, or a Kickstarter, but then you had to know someone in America or UK, and we weren't ready to entrust someone with that amounts of money. And so why did we feel bad? Because we had a lot of weird expectations. For one thing, we believed in the meritocracy, I think, is perpetuated in the Western world, at least in capitalist societies, that if you have a good idea and if you just put your soul in it, if you build it, they will come. But we weren't, and Sweden is a really privileged country if you compare to most of the world, but if you compete on an international market, Sweden is not the center of the game industry. And so there's like, it's far away from like the big trade shows, and we don't know the secret handshakes to convince all of the international magazines and media outlets. Of course, we tried really hard, and we got 20 articles and 20 Let's Plays or something, but we thought that it was enough with a good idea. And we were also kind of, this is from a indie dev artist called Scott Benson, who is currently making a game called Night in the Woods. Can really recommend checking out. And this is his pinned tweet, and I think it's great words to live by. And when we started out, we were kind of, I don't know if I'm not blaming anyone else, but it felt like, at least in my class on university, it felt like we were sort of elitist. We thought that we were the best in the world, which is not true at all, of course. But we thought that we were above the curve, so to speak, and we didn't really bother with connecting with other indie devs and with media outlets before we started our crowdfunding, which is, of course, a big mistake. And so I think we've all got a lot more humble since then, and connected with a lot of indie devs. For example, there's a small collective called Playful Oasis, which Might and Delight is part of, among other things. And Forgotten Key, which you might know for the game Air. So I think and we post regularly on TIG Source, which I can really recommend, hanging out. Like all of the big indie devs are there. And yeah, so we didn't really connect with our peers and the public in large, like we thought that everyone would come. And of course, that is not true. And maybe this is the biggest problem we have had. We have constantly lived in the shadow of Goddess. I guess most of you know of Goddess, but basically it's Peter Molyneux's the regenesis of the God game, and I guess it's safe to say that it's been a Kickstarter fiasco. 60% of the reviews on Steam are negative, and this is not me. I don't want to say what I think of the game because that doesn't really matter. But it's safe to say that a lot of people aren't happy with the game. And since the start, people have compared us constantly to Goddess. Some people say that we're ripping the game off, both in art style. That's why I added the name, so you can differentiate them. But also in the mechanics, because in some interview one day Molyneux said that, oh, we will have commandments, and some people basically thought there's a fascinating conspiracy theory about our game on the Goddess forum, which we sometime I've printed it out and I look at it sometimes because it's such a marvelous conspiracy theory. So it basically goes that when Goddess went into decline, we got up and tried to steal their thunder. But I don't know if you want to consciously associate yourself with a train wreck. And I really feel for 22 Cans. I sympathize with their situation, but that doesn't mean I want to take part of the shitfest that goes around there. And so they criticize us for being a ripoff with both mechanics and art style. And I have, as an art director, I've consciously tried to differentiate ourselves. Of course, the low poly style is hard to. Of course, we both have low poly styles, but that's basically because that's the same thing where there's a lot of pixel art games, because you can make a polished, consistent art style with small means, and that's the same thing with low poly 3D art. There's a lot of indie games which is low poly, and I don't think we would have been able to make Crest without having a minimalistic art style. And I've consciously tried to go take the low poly style somewhere else. And I really thought it was enough, but for some people it wasn't. For a time we had a PR agency, and they also work with Simon Roth, which is famous for the game called Maya, which is also in early access. And he gets associated with another project called Space DF9, which is an early access fiasco, which Double Fine did. And since both games are about building space bases, there's a lot of people commenting on him all the time, like, "Oh, will your game fail because Space Base failed?" And he had to do a big blog post assuring people that I have nothing to do with Space Base and I won't fail. I still have a lot of money. I have a dedicated team. We're progressing. And yeah, so I don't know if this is I don't know. I guess most of you have heard of the new Fat Shark game, Vermintide. I played it with my friends just last night. And some people say that it's a rip-off of Left 4 Dead. Some people joke that it's called Left 4 Skaven, which are the people or the rats you kill in the game. And I don't know if this is this is more of a question. It would be interesting if someone made a thesis about it. I think. How, is there, if you're in a niche, are you more harshly judged of originality, but rather than in a established genre? Because to me, accusing Crest ripping off Goddess is like accusing BioShock ripping off Half-Life 2, because both strive to do realism and both are basically about pointing at people and saying "bam." But that's just me. But we didn't. But it's safe to say that we didn't understand that people couldn't distinguish the games, and that's our fault, obviously, because it doesn't matter if they like it or not. This is a great film. I can really recommend it. It's a complex discussion about racism. And why I bring this film up is because it's one of Oscar's favorites. And when we started out, I came with the basic premise like, oh, you write commandments and stuff. And of course, Oscar was paramount in nailing, and on the other people in the team. But Oscar really pushed hard for that we had some diversity in the game. Why? Like, my pitch was like, oh yeah, you write commandments, and it's taking place during Bronze Age on Gotland, because that's original. Hasn't been done before. And Oscar looked skeptical at me and said, you know what? Why can't we take another continent that are usually not used in games? Why can't we take Africa instead? And then I said, yeah, I guess that's even more original. But I said that there's like, I mean, I read a lot of history, and I know the colonial perspective. Like, it's really easy to mess up with the cultural appropriation. So Christopher and I, we did our best, but I still thought it was a great idea. Like, why don't we have a game, like, they say that the cradle of humankind is South Africa, and that all people stem from this area. So we basically came up with the idea that why can't the players play in the beginning of human history, and therefore there are no white people, for example. So why don't we have a game with only people of color? And I said, yeah, that's like, it's really interesting from a historical perspective as well, I said. And since I personally also identify as queer, I said to him, like, why can't we have people who dress the same, whatever their sex? So we have female and male models, and they have the same dress code. We just switch sexual dimorphism. And so I would say that these two things make our game somewhat progressive in diversity, but we failed to make a story out of this. And I would say that we have got, like, we've tried to explain, but I think we've got more criticism than praise so far. And I don't say that we don't deserve criticism and that we should have a pat on the back. I just mean that we could have sold our story better. We also made, during our crowdfunding, we did a 2-week prototype called Eat, Create, Sleep Adventures, which is basically, we didn't have a producer at the time, so we made a sort of, like, it's kind of narcissistic, but we made a documentary about the first year of making Crest, and the player played as our producer. And so they went back in time and tried to, like we were so self-conscious that we said, yeah, we suck at management, so why don't you travel back in time and fix it? And we thought it was a pretty novel idea for a crowdfunding campaign. And I guess the meritocracy thing came back, the fallacy, because we realized that just because you have a good idea doesn't mean that no one will care, because how do you get it out? We had no idea how we would sell it to media. So we got like 3 articles about it and like 2 Let's Plays. And I think 500 people played it during our crowdfunding. So I think it was a good idea, but without any like a PR agency behind us, because we hadn't employed them yet. I think if you have a good idea, you need to have money to sell it as well, because it's not guaranteed that just because you have a good idea it will spread virally. There's a new edition out now. You can play it via WebGL. There's a link later. So but we succeeded with our crowdfunding, but I don't think any one of us felt like it was a success. We barely scraped by, and we didn't build a big community. Of course, we were happy that we could continue with money. And we also got a grant from the municipality. I can really recommend like checking out other sources of income. And we also took a loan from Alumni. So we had enough money to go for a while. We hired a producer finally, Sophie Van. And things were starting to look up. And this is April this year. And so this is how the prototype looked. We actually showed it at the conference back in 2013. Or 14, I mean. And the commandment system, for example, was pretty unintuitive. Like, you basically picked words, and then it was really difficult to like write sentences, because the people they think in mechanics. They don't think in the English language. So it was easy that it turned into English. So we changed this to the symbol language we have today, which works more like a puzzle, where the context matters. So we spent several months of like making new systems. We introduced animals, among other things. And I think the problem here was that we spent too much time on pre-production again. But at the same time, if we hadn't, we would have polished a turd, so to speak, as the good Pernilla Persson usually says to her artist students. But we released on early access in April this year in the end, and we didn't really sell anything at all. And now the biggest bottom was reached. And this was a time of strife and suffering. Two of our members left, mostly due to personal reasons, but I think, and Oscar, who was the other founding member, he moved, mostly due to personal reasons, but I think like we were all ready to leave at this point, because as I said, our money were running dry, so we had to release on early access. And we released too early because, I mean, there's some easy advice going on the net that, oh, you shouldn't release too early, but I don't think that any indie developer is so stupid to think that, oh, maybe if I release a subpar product, people will buy it. Like, I think most people have to release it because it's either that or starve. And at this time, people started to criticize our project because, when you're still in this mythical state of not being released, people can have any expectations at all. Like, they can believe that it's amazing, but when they actually can interact with it, they might come back to Earth and realize that it's not a dream project. And so we started to get angry comments on our Steam forum and stuff, and I mean some really nasty stuff, like this is almost a complete failure of a game and stuff like that. And it wasn't aimed at other people, like it was aimed to us. And I was like, as the community manager, I was prepared for this, but it's still like when you're not selling anything, and like we worked without wages for like 6 months. And when you don't work for the money, you have to trick yourself that you're at least making it for people. But when you see people who like are really nasty, like at least I started to lose hope. Like, if people hate it, why am I doing this? Even like if I get paid and hated, at least I get paid. But it's not a great situation being both, being poor and hated. So I think Jeff Vogel has an excellent quotes which I will read. If you let too many loud voices into your head, it can drive you mad. Outside feedback is necessary, but you have to filter it. And I think this is a hard lesson. Like, just because some people hate it doesn't mean that it actually sucks. But it's. I think when you're like making a personal game, it's hard to distance yourself from people who hate it. But you have to try to look at the positive comments. They are the people you're making the game for. Though, as Jeff said, you should still filter it. Maybe they are saying something relevant. Like, you can still learn from the negative comments, but you shouldn't like put your self-worth on the negative ones. And he also said, if you put your game on early access, you must do one of these two things. 1, finish it roughly according to the schedule. Or 2, humbly explain what is going on and apologize. We chose the latter. We actually had a long debate in the studio, like, should we really expose ourselves? Should we say to our early access backers that we have run out of money and that we're really poor and we don't know if we can continue? Like, won't we scare away everyone? And then we voted for, yes, we will expose, we will show them the reality that we really want to make this game, but we don't have any money. So we came up with this system. Like, Crest was, like, we added weekly updates, but in a like a simulation-heavy game like Crest, there's not a lot happening from week to week. So I learned from other great early access like commercial successes like Darkest Dungeon and Armello, where they basically like make themed modules. So they even give the modules names and try to market them. Like, oh, this month we add this functionality. So this is basically how we have communicated the game since then. And we said that we will add sort of like a stretch goal system. Like, we will add one module at a time. Which worked great, actually, because now we could, in a tangible way, talk with our audience what comes next and when it comes. And we've also done weekly devlog since, like, for more than a year. So this is one of the current ones. And like, I think our support has grown since we showed that, like, when we showed our weakness, I think our community has been more supportive and kind. And like, we have one person called Daniel who usually posts like every week on our devlog, and sort of something to look forward to almost. And it feels like more and more that, yeah, sure, we want to survive, but it's like, I don't want to disappoint them because they've put so much faith in us. But it turned out to be like a good idea to expose our pain and suffering. And here's an image of Johannes, the lead programmer, and I. It looks like we're really suffering, but I think if you have played Super Mario Brothers 3, you know that that's a really painful level. It's one of the last. So we actually came up with, like, when we were feeling down, we had like this coffee break, fika break, like 30 minutes per day, and we realized, why can't we do something more epic than just talk about our misery? Let's play games instead. So at Science Park, they have an old NES hooked up to an old television. And so we actually decided to have like a speed run of the game. So the rules were that each day we would try to beat a world. There's 8 worlds in the game, and we tried to get good enough so we can complete a world in 30 minutes. And amazingly, we could. So there's a sort of like an built-in sheet where you can change a world So our rules were that if we had beaten a level in our speed run, we could go to the next. So it became like this 3-month epic journey of beating Super Mario in a really odd way. So we know most of these levels by heart because we've played them hundreds of times. And we realized that dreams, like when you don't have money, at least you have the community. Like the other team members are really more important than money. So if you're suffering, you should really like look for support from each other. Even though I said that we're not great at PR, we did one interesting experiment, which we did with a PR agency, and we basically wanted to make a parody of a certain way to pitch games, which we personally don't think is a great idea. So this generator can come up with hundreds of pitches. This is also a little wink to Rami Ismail's great press kit, which we use, and you should use too. And we realized that since we have this tweet button, people could tweet their pitches, and they could also write. Like, it wasn't really an intended option, but usually the pitch was like 100 characters or so. So there were usually like 40 characters left. And we realized that a lot of people utilized this to comment the pitch. Like, oh yeah, I want this, or oh, burn, or something. So I think we realized that you can go viral if you have like this participatory element in the game, in the like PR campaign. So yeah, if you want to try it out, you can go there. And there's also a link to the Eat, Create, Sleep game, or Adventures game. So we had a small peak there. We had when we had a preview in Rock Paper Shotgun for our early access. We actually got a new member. Like we have a British programmer called Yasha, who helps us. He read the preview on Rock Paper Shotgun, and there sort of like erupted a spontaneous religious discussion on the comment section. He was inspired about, wow, this game can take the audience into interesting places. So he contacted us on Twitter and joked that, oh, maybe I should work with you. And we said, yeah, why not? And so he started collaborating with us. So that was a really happy moment. And he didn't really expect any money either. So he really believed in the idea. So that was a small glimpse. But yeah, November. So we were on our last legs. I mean, most of us had lived on like family and friends, and we realized that this is not realistic in the end. And we said, oh, we can survive until January or something, and we were really depressed. Like, this would be the worst Christmas ever. But then as one person contacted us, like one of the people know a person who needed a lot of help, and also an indie dev, and they gave us an offer that was hard to refuse. So we got a big work for hire project, which we develop on the side, and we've been very transparent with our audience. Like, we have to spend some time to pay our bills, and they're supportive. So I guess everything is fine again. So I just want to summarize a bit. Like, this is a great game, Civilization 5, and in the game you can win in a lot of different ways. And this is perhaps where I want to tell you that, like, if you only see from the commercial perspective, like, you should sell games, then there are like the fail state and win state is fairly easy to understand. But just as in Civilization, there are a lot of different victories. Like, yes, Among Ripples hasn't given us anything, but at the same time, if we would have taken money for Among Ripples, would people have played it? Because, and here's a small shout out to Albertina Sparhult, which we'll talk later. I talked with her about it, and she said that like we were debating if we would release Among Ripples for free or take $1 or something, and Albertina pushed us in the right direction. And I just want to say that it was the right decision, because most people on Steam say, yeah, it's all right, nothing much to do, but at least it's free. So that's the most common comment, positive comment on Steam. So I think we would have charged money for the game. We would have mostly negative, and like we would have 5 people playing it. So what I mean is, like, there are many ways to succeed, and many ways to fail. Like, you can make a lot of money, but let's say that, like, since, as you understand, our studio is a bit pretentious, so yes, you can, if you make a lot of money, but your game doesn't say anything, it doesn't connect with your audience, maybe that's a failure if that's a studio you want to make. So I think it's important to keep in mind that you should try to not look at like a binary, one winning condition and one failure state. And I also want to, I will read this quote from a great book. I also want to say that being naive is, I think, not impossible. Rather, I think it's a prerequisite to survive. So I wouldn't say that, yes, we could have learned more before we started, but I don't think it's possible to know everything. And I think that life would be pretty boring if so. So I will read this quote. The unknown, the unforetold, the unproven, that is what life is based on. Ignorance is the base of thought, unproof is the base of action. If it were proven that there is no God, there would be no religion. But also if it were proven that there is a God, there would be no religion. Can really recommend the book by Ursula K. Le Guin. So what I mean is that I don't think we would have taken this journey if we know about all, like, if you know about a lot of ways to fail and succeed, you sort of become, you start to see all these possible options, sort of like you can see 20 different futures. And I think, yes, you should do your research as much as you can, but like charging head on is, I think, like, that's how we live. Like, it's impossible to know everything, and if we did, I don't think it would be worth going to work. And here's a word from our sponsors. Next year, late next year, we'll start with our next project, and if anyone is interested, please join us. These are the positions we're looking for. It's also worth mentioning that we're currently looking for investors as well. So we don't plan to have this up and down trauma in the future. Yes, that's it. Thank you. Yes?
You said you were looking for a producer and that you had one before. What exactly does a producer do in the case of your group? Because I know that changes a lot between different groups and companies. And yeah.
Okay, so the question is, what is our definition of a producer? And I agree that it's very ambiguous. I don't think we've understood either. No, I'm kidding. But I think our definition of a producer is someone who, sort of like I've understood the function in the film industry, for example, that they try to shield the director from. So the director can be up in the clouds and doing all this crazy stuff, like shield them from reality, sort of. But practical matters like a scrum master, having shaking up on the economy, like community management. It's like everyone in our, I mean, and that's maybe our definition because everyone in our group has like 4 hats. So perhaps that role would be narrowed down considerably in another, like in a AAA company or something. But I guess, yeah. So economics, Scrum, and community management and human resources, basically.
A bit of a follow-up, if I could. In the case of your producer, would they need any particular experience or focus on something in these studies? Because we're all year 1 students after all.
Okay. I will participate on the party tomorrow, so you're free to ask me more then, or anyone else for that matter. Anyone else? Yes?
When did you all realize that you wanted to do something with indie instead of working for a bigger company?
So the question is, when did we realize when we wanted to work with indie development? Yeah, that's a tough question. I think like in the 2nd year or something, I realized that, I guess this is, as I said, we had a lot of elitistic thoughts, but I think like I thought that the ideas we came up with at this school was like next gen in the game design compared to the game industry at large. Of course, that's not true, but I still think that I sort of realized that there's it's hard to stay like personal in a big group, because you know if you have a AAA company with 200 people or something, if all of them want to have a personal touch, it sort of like comes like a madhouse. So I realized that if we wanted to make small personal games, we had to stay small and stay independent as well, because when we suffered in our big decline, we actually went out to a lot of publishers as a last resort, and most publishers weren't interested. And of course, that's probably a myriad of reasons. Some of them said that since we were already in early access, it was too late. And so I'm not saying that like it's a bad idea or anything. Like, but yeah, I think staying independent and staying personal. So I guess that dawned in the 2nd year. Anyone else? Please.
Did you have any? You said you were located in the science park.
Yes.
How did you afford that during the period of no income, so to speak?
Okay, so the question was, how could you afford an office when we had no funds? We basically took from our own pockets, but because it was really important, like community has been really important. Just like sitting down together each day and talk and iterate, like it's been really important bonding with each other. So we thought that it was more important than wages right then. But Science Park, I don't know if they will have in the future, because they will move to the school, which you probably know of. But when they still were the managers of the incubator park, they had this really great discount, like 75% discount for 6 months. So we paid like 1,000 crowns. So yeah, getting a cheap office space is recommended. Or work at home. Yes, please.
What was the most idiotic thing you did under the
when you were creating the game, what was the most idiotic thing you did then?
Okay, so the question was, what was the most idiotic thing we did during development? I think it's like being a decent human being. No, I really mean it. Like, if you're really pressured, like by inner angst and outer reasons, like it's hard sometimes not to snap to your colleagues. So I wouldn't say that we've been like really stupid. I mean, the people who have left our studio, we parted as friends. There's no bad blood there, but sometimes it's been hard being decent. So I think that would be the most idiotic thing. Like we put business and economics before being humans.
Yeah, I'm probably going to ask a similar question later again in the panel, but I could ask this personally perhaps. What was one of the first things you had to learn outside of school when you first started working in the
I think so. The question is, what was the first thing we had to learn when we like got outside of the school? And I would say that it's basically have a social media presence. Don't be afraid to show something that isn't finished. Like we started our. If you don't know about TIG Source, they have a great subsection called the devlog section, where a lot of indie devs, I mean, I could name drop a lot of them, but you know, there's a lot of famous, usually when I see a Kickstarter project, I see, oh, I saw that devlog for 6 months ago. So it's the best place to keep up to speed what's going on in the indie dev scene. But like, we didn't post anything publicly until like a year in development, and like Rock Paper Shotgun, like recently they there's this game which is barely a game right now, which is called Death Trash, and it's a solo developer, I think. I remember his last name, Havelbrinks, and he did a animated GIF of a game concept, and Rock Paper Shotgun wrote an article about his GIF, and it wasn't even like a playable prototype. So they created hype before it was a game, and so I think it's never too early to reach out, because you can even start hype on your project before there's anything to play. So I think that's what we've learned the most. So now we post daily on TIG Source and Twitter and stuff. Just like, oh, we Christopher draw a dot. Let's take a photo of that. Yeah. Anything else? Please.
What did it take before you settled on a game concept to actually work on? What made you feel like, yeah, this could actually work for the next couple of months or even years?
So if I understand correctly, you mean how did we decide what concept to pick?
Yeah.
Okay. So the question was, how can we, as a group, decide what game concept to take further? And I think this is something I would say that was also a failure. Like we said, oh, but we really want to make this game, and business considerations are not really, because as I said, we had this pretentious idea that we're a band. Let's just do it for the art, so to speak. For our new project Synvilla, we actually as you probably all are aware of the MDA framework, we sort of have tried to expand on that and nail what is the visual layer, what is business considerations, what is the mechanical, what is the high concept. So we try to incorporate the business part. oh, we should have split screen or 4-player, or we should have more than 4-player because that's a good business consideration. So we try to, for our next project, we try to like pick all these different like concepts that and see if they conflict with each other, because if there are a great business consideration that doesn't really diminish the art, then why not go for it? And sometimes that pretentious idea might need to be cut because the business consideration is more important. So I would say that today we look at it from this multitude perspective of, can we survive? Is it relevant to us? Is it relevant to the world? But when we started, it was basically I had a good idea, or I thought I had. But we have this like I joke sometimes that we're sort of like philosophers. We sit and argue, like, because we try to have a democratic. So everyone is sort of like the designer in the pre-production phase. We have a lead designer that tries to rein everything in, but I think you could say that if someone makes a proposal, just like in the good old days in Athens, like with their democracy, like they didn't really have any leader, but if someone had a good pitch, they could win everyone over. So I guess of course it's not always true, but we try to like have like if you have a solid logical argument and you don't have anything like, oh, but I don't like that. Like that's not like the one with the best argument wins, sort of. So we try to like help each other take away the dirt from a brilliant idea, so to speak, with logical arguments. Yes, anyone else? All right, I guess we're finished.
Yeah.
Thank you.